And welcome back. It's another week, another topic on Good Vibes. I'm Martin False along with Debbie Cox DeNova, and we are going to talk today about becoming resilient.
Yes.
I don't know any other way.
You have to.
Yeah.
You really have a choice in life. You can either go about the sufferings of life and bounce back, or you can go deeper into a hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what a lot of people do. So we're talking about today is resilience. And resilience is not just about strength, right? It's about bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, ice is strong, but if you hit it with a hammer, it's going to shatter everywhere, right? But when we talk about resilience, we're talking about strength as well as like flexibility. So it's almost like a vulnerability, which we talked about the value of vulnerability, right? Everything you want, courage, joy, happiness, peace, there's a level of vulnerability to it. If you think about a trampoline is strong, right? But with the springs, you're actually bouncing. There's a bounce back effect to it. And so that's what we're talking about here, is that you cannot go through this life without some level of suffering, unfortunately.
Look at the Cowardly Lion.
Right?
Yeah, he wanted to act tough and all, but he was a wuss.
Yes, and that is exactly what this information comes from. Emma McAdams, and she talks about that is that sometimes when you believe that you have to force through and present with strength, what's actually happening is you're becoming more fragile on the back end. So you're presenting like everything's okay, and shame will actually often invite you to do this. So you're struggling in your marriage, pretend everything's okay. If you have depression, don't let anyone know, right? If there's trauma in your history, hide it. And so what happens is that you're presenting with strength, but in the background, you're becoming more vulnerable, you're becoming more fragile. And so in order for us to actually move into more resilience, there are six things that she has identified are characteristics of those who have greater resilience. So we're going to go through those one by one.
All
right. The first one is a growth mindset. So someone who has resilience in life, they believe that everything is figure outable. So if there is, and so we talked about growth versus fixed mindset, right, from Carol Dweck's research. So someone with a fixed mindset believes that this is just the way things are. This is how I am in life. There's no changing it, right? Whereas someone who is very resilient has a growth mindset. So that's really helpful because when life hits you, you actually can start to look at it as an opportunity to develop more skills. If you don't know in the moment, develop more skills and get better through the process of overcoming whatever it is. You actually exhibit this quite well in your life, in your world. Like there are setbacks. It's like if you're running a production of any kind, anyone who's ever thrown a wedding or a big event or some sort of production knows that there will be something that shows up in a way that's disappointing, right? And so if you're the type of person who believes, okay, this is not working, like what can we do? How can we figure this out and move around it? Then you're likely to overcome and move on to the next stage and actually become a better person for it. So,
I've never had a perfect show yet.
Right.
In 40 years.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And only you know that, right? Like
right.
You're right there. We talked about having the imposter syndrome and actually being able to know where all the chinks in the armor actually are, but being able to actually address those concerns behind the scenes and work around and actually have that mindset of like, okay, that didn't work. What's next, right? Really powerful. Yeah. Number 2 is to replace shame with connection, okay? And so people who are resilient tend to organize teams. They don't try to do it alone. They ask for help. Again, this requires a level of vulnerability, which often has people, especially those experiencing deep psychological issues or trauma, to hide. They hide the vulnerabilities in order to present because there's a deep-seated belief that if I am exposed, I'll actually have a worsening of consequences. People will leave me and that sort of thing. So someone who has a lot of resilience knows that it's important to connect when I can't figure this out, organize the best minds and go, hey, what do I do here? I'm not sure where to go from here. Can you help me? And that's why it's not just them alone moving through life. Whenever they have a challenge, they actually create connections in their network and ask for the support to move them up to the next place. Okay. Number 3 is they have the skills for tolerating uncomfortable emotions. So there's a time and a place to force through. the emotional feelings, right? But if that's the only thing in your repertoire, it's not going to work all the time. The emotions, as we've talked about, are there for a reason. They inform us to something that needs addressing. And so those who have a lot of resilience have a toolbox full of things that they use to address and process through the emotions that come up. So in the moment, for example, you may want to address your anger issues with your child, right? Behind closed doors, doing shadow work and journaling. But in the moment, if your child says something that's disrespectful to you and you find it pushes a button and you go into rage, in the moment, you need a tool to pull from your toolbox to help regulate your nervous system so that you can actually respond instead of reacting to your
We're
child.
not talking about a hammer.
Not talking about a hammer, right? Right? And so sometimes a hammer is necessary, but you need to be able to, like, if that is not appropriate for the situation, you need to have tools that you can grab and go, okay, I know about the psychological, the physiological sigh, right? We talked about that the 3 deep breaths, double inhale, long exhale to activate the vagus nerve to bring myself back into a calm state, to send the signal from my body to my brain, all is well. There's no tiger chasing us. This toddler that's throwing a tantrum right now is not actually threatening my life.
So what you're really saying is, all is well, but I'm lying to myself.
And as long as it gets you through so that you
Right.
don't do something that you regret on the other end, like
Yeah.
that's a very powerful thing.
Out to 10. 1, 2.
So first and foremost, going back to that original one, believe that it is possible for you because it really is. It really you can become way more resilient than you are currently. So we went through the first one, the first 3, the growth mindset, replacing shame with connection and vulnerability, and then skills for tolerating uncomfortable emotions in your toolbox, which we have a ton of them that we've talked about if anyone wants to go back to the prior shows about regulating your emotions. The 4th one is to focus on what you can control and accept what you can't control. So for example, if you're planning this amazing, beautiful wedding and it's outdoors, and then it just decides to rain on that day, you could stand there and go, why is this whole day ruined? And focus on the fact that it's raining, which you cannot control. Or you could focus on what you can control and start to move pieces around so that you can still have a beautiful wedding indoors, right?
Or you could run like hell and say, it wasn't meant to be.
Right? It's supposed to be good luck when it rains on your day.
It's supposed to be.
Right. So actually taking that locus of control, and it's an internal locus of control instead of external. So really actually focusing on, all right, this happened, right? I'll have people sometimes that I coach who are having relationship issues, and they're hyper focused on what the other person will not or will or won't do, right? And not at all focused on what they can do. And so I love to take them back to, okay, let's see what we can do within yourself first, and then we can focus on, because if you're showing up a certain way, it's possible that you're activating each other's trauma. And so if you want the first place to start, it's always within yourself. So focus on what you can control. It will elevate you to different places. And then the areas that you can control will actually oftentimes expand, okay?
I saw yesterday on some national show that sometimes the biggest growth in a couple is after they have a fight.
Oh, yeah. And we talked about that, rupture and repair, right? So it's that ability to not only navigate through the tough stuff, but actually to reinforce your relationship so that the event, that you're not thriving in spite of the event, but you're actually thriving because of the event. I mean, I'm sure you can think about examples in your own life too, where it's like you look back and it's like, oh, I'm kind of glad that happened. It brought us closer together, right? And you can weather more
I'm
storms in
going
the
to retitle
future.
what you said, rupture and repair. I'm going to say rupture, despair, then repair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's try not to go into despair. There was a 2005 study on depression that actually defined depression as a combination of hopelessness and helplessness.
Really?
Yeah. And so if you think about depression as hopelessness and helplessness, then resilience is the opposite, okay? Resilience is that accepting what you cannot change and focusing on what you can change. So remember that. There's always an area that you can focus on and take action
I
in.
don't think I've ever dwelled on hopelessness and helplessness.
That it shows.
I look at it as a challenge.
Yes, it shows. And that's why you're not it's spiraling into depression. You're actually productive no matter the challenges that come your way. So the 5th one is about flexibility. So if you have too rigid of a mindset, it actually can lead to mental issues, right? You think about like one track mind, I will not bend, this is the way it has to be. and there's no flexibility. Those who are resilient actually have a creative approach to when things don't work out their way. First of all, they accept failure as part of the process of growth, right? It's just going to happen. We all know that when we go for something, it hardly ever is like, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be the best artist, in my first painting class, right? There's a process of getting it wrong repeatedly and being able to think creatively and approach it from a different aspect. So different angle, getting creative, and going from different routes in order to
Pre-season.
Yes, yes, exactly. So you're actually just you're willing and able from the offset to understand that, okay, I'm going to fail. I'm going to be really bad at this. I'm really willing to be very bad at this until I get good at it, right? And so then what happens is when those inevitable failures or setbacks happen, you see them as like, okay, all right, that happened. And you can see it in the posture, right? Like if you can see somebody out, on playing sports of any kind, when they fail, the ones who are just defeated in their posture. It might be like, over 6 feet tall, athletic looking, but the posture is just like defeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Versus,
And when they beat.
Oh, yeah. And it starts here, right? So versus someone who just failed, but gets back up and is like, okay, I'm ready to go again.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're talking about, is that flexibility of like, all right, I didn't get it right that time, but I'm ready to move to a different angle. And it's very important that you not do the same exact thing. Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
I always said, my dad used to tell me too, and I repeat it, pressure is the opportunity to do well.
Ooh, I love that. I love that a lot. Well, you're going to really like the last one. The last one, last characteristic of those who are resilient in life is that they laugh a lot. So there are two options, right? You can laugh or you can cry. Cry's a little less enjoyable, right? But if you have...
catch me when I'm laughing a lot.
Oh, yes.
But sometimes I'm crying a lot.
I know. And it's a combination of both. But those who are resilient in life have a tendency to create levity where other people might create contraction. It's like, okay, well, and you make a little joke and it kind of just brings your vibration up just a little bit so that you can actually keep going, And so being able to infuse humor into it not only creates this ability to move forward for yourself, but it creates an environment for you and your people that you're working with.
Hey, boss, I ran over the camera today. Okay, no problem. Good show.
Right.
We'll talk next week.
Yes.
And we'll see you next week.